Hey guys, tonight we ease into the shimmering shadows and warm, buzzing air of ancient Australia. Picture this. You're settling down under stars that spill like spilled sugar across the world's oldest painted sky, the last orange embers of a campfire flickering on red dust. The world is silent except for distant insect song and close by, the soft breaths of others who have gathered to listen. You're a heartbeat away from drifting into dream time. Now, as you cozy up, just know, you probably won't survive this. If you had to last one night alone in the Outback with nothing but your phone's battery. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're here, I'd love to know, where are you tuning in from and what time is it right now? Scroll down and let me know below. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Let's slip into the dream time, a world that coils and uncurls in gentle layers every time these ancient stories are told. You're there. The night breeze is cool against your cheek, and the world moves slow. Around you, there's the sense that every stone and rustle means something. For Indigenous Australians, Dreamtime tells not just of beginnings but of eternity, stories that loop, reconnect, and shape reality. You sense it's a time before clock time, a forever young world where creation is always happening. The firelight casts long shadows, drawing everyone closer, each person feeling the story thread tugging at their mind. Maybe you're getting sleepy already, but don't worry, nobody's grading your recall in the morning. The first thing that sinks in is how old these stories are. They're not just bedtime tales. They are archaeological treasures, passed from elder to child across time spans you can't really picture. Think tens of thousands of years. That's longer than the pyramids have stood, or even the lost city of Atlantis, if historians could agree Atlantis existed at all. Here's a fact. The Aboriginal Dreamtime predates both ancient Greek myth and the earliest written records. The oldest rock paintings depicting Dreamtime creatures pulse with ochre and clay, barely faded by wind and rain. Imagine the patience required to remember and tell these same stories over and over, sometimes by starlight, sometimes at dawn. If humans had gold medals for oral tradition, these communities would win all the trophies and probably carve a cheeky animal face on every one. As you listen, it's clear. Dreamtime is not like your standard myth or bedtime fairy tale where there's a neat beginning, middle, and end. You're pulled into a kind of lyrical fog. Every event echoes into the present. Every character's choice shapes the world you walk in. You realize, if you sneeze in a Dreamtime story, you might accidentally invent the platypus. And yes, platypuses show up a lot in Dreamtime, because who wouldn't want to explain such a weird animal with a good story? Funny how some things don't need much help to be mysterious. But there's more happening here than a tail-nibbling yarn about lizards and rivers. Dreamtime soothes with its pace and cyclical flow. No rush, no deadlines, just the slow settling of meaning. You lie there, your muscles uncoiling, as the storyteller's words dance around the night air. Maybe someone's humming gently, or tapping a wooden stick in sync with your heartbeat. You sense a calm that doesn't come from screens or apps or soothing essential oils. Though, if anyone had invented eucalyptus spray 50,000 years ago, you bet it would get a starring role. Instead, what you have is the world itself, unfolding from story. Modern science keeps finding links between ancient oral traditions and the human nervous system. Listening to stories like Dreamtime can slow your pulse, anchor your mind in the present. Mainstream researchers even say storytelling underpins our ability to empathize and self-soothe. Here's the quirky bit. Some linguists argue that certain Dreamtime stories encode actual geological events. Tsunamis, volcanic eruptions, cosmic impacts, retold so accurately that they've outlasted written civilizations. You'd think memory would play tricks, but those details stick like gum to your shoe. But don't think you can just fast forward to the moral and call it a night. Dreamtime isn't satisfied with quick takeaways or bullet point wisdom. The comfort comes from repetition, from each word wearing grooves in your brain, the same way water rounds the edges of a creek stone. You're not just hearing history, you're living inside a mythic meditation. It's almost a practice, waiting for meaning to reveal itself, not needing to fill empty space with chatter. Historians still argue whether Dreamtime stories lost some meanings over time, or if each telling subtly transforms them, keeping them alive. So why are Dreamtime stories so calming? Maybe it's the setting, lying close to Earth, stone cool beneath your back, constellations twirling above that nobody in ancient Athens could even dream up. Or maybe it's that sense of protection, the space carved out by tradition, where each listener is wrapped in the safety of memory. Your regular worries, the test scores, the bills, the terrifying march of inbox notifications, fade away for a little while. All that matters is the pattern of sounds, the glow of shared experience, the hush. And there's always a clever wink built in. You're not told every secret. Like the best ASMR videos, Dreamtime stories work because they don't force-feed details. They drift, they float, they promise that not everything can or should be explained. That's a lost art. Maybe if more podcasts had unsolved endings, we'd all sleep better. Apart from that one friend who needs everything triple spoilered in advance. You know who you are. You notice that a story's calm doesn't rely on happy endings or perfect harmony. Some Dreamtime tales are strange, a bit dark, or just plain bizarre. Did I mention there's actually a Dreamtime legend about frogs who invent rain by swallowing all the water, then burping it back out? The air here is thick with laughter as much as awe, and you're reminded. A story's job is not just to teach, but to console. The world is weird, the world is beautiful. Maybe, lying in the quiet, your mind begins to drift, anchored by the rhythms. You realize you're at home inside this ancient net of narrative. By the end of the telling, you might feel as if you've traveled, safely, mind you, through centuries. You're calmer, closer, somehow smaller but safer too. And all it took was story, shadow, and the patient hush passed down from voices far older than anything else you'll hear before you close your eyes tonight. Your mind drifts across the red-hued soil of the Australian outback as soft dusk light paints your skin golden. Every bump and hollow of this land seems to hold a secret, a memory. Imagine for a moment that each stone and ripple in the sand is part of a sentence in an old, ongoing story. A story so old, older than any skyscraper, older than your neighbor's handshake deals at yard sales, older even than the time you tried to microwave aluminum foil out of pure curiosity. Here is where Dreamtime begins to seep into you, not as a fairy tale, but as a slow reveal of how ancient people read the world as a living, breathing storybook. If you stand very still, you might sense the echoes underfoot, tracing back to when the continent itself was young. Australian Indigenous Dreamtime stories, or creation stories, if you want the fancy museum label, don't just explain what the land looks like. They claim to make asterisk the land what it is. These legends act like the ultimate origin code, programming the hills, the winding rivers, even the way eucalyptus shade falls on your face. Elders recount how spirit beings, often enormous and fantastically weird, roamed an earth that was shapeless, waking it up with their song, their footsteps, and sometimes their squabbles. Some stories suggest the rainbow serpent slithered across a flat, formless continent, curling rivers from mere grooves made by its twisting body. Other times, it's ancestral kangaroos who, with every leap, raise mountains behind them, apparently as a side effect of really intensive cardio. You might smirk at tales of giant caterpillars digging gorges or emus pecking out starlight, but try not to. Because in this worldview, narrative and geography are fused. Picking out the origin in Dreamtime legends isn't like tracing a family tree, with neat, branching lines. It's more like mixing paint colors on a palette. You can't exactly tell where one ends and another begins, but you recognize the shades they create together. Historians generally agree that these stories are among the oldest continuing cultural traditions on Earth, with some rock art and oral histories believed to be at least 40,000 years old. They've survived ice ages, volcanic tantrums, and recently, even flat whites with oat milk. But when you close your eyes and feel the land's pulse, a pulse present in every clump of brittle spinifex grass, you start to realize that these stories are not only myths invented to calm bedtime nerves or remind children not to wander off, though, admittedly, "Don't go swimming there or the bunyip will eat you" is pretty effective parenting. They are blueprints that map out how to navigate the world, telling people where water holes bubble up after rain, which plants are edible, and where it's best not to take a nap unless you're prepared for a permanent dirt nap. In that sense, Dreamtime narratives function as practical GPS, though with more talking animals than your average voice navigation, and definitely fewer wrong turns down, recalculating route, just because you mishear a kangaroo. One mainstream historical fact woven through the fabric of Dreamtime stories is that many of them encode real geological or environmental events. Take, for example, stories preserved by the Lardle people on Mornington Island, which recall the time when sea levels rose and islands became separated by water. Mainstream scholars recognize that these oral tales correlate with actual post-glacial flooding events, which occurred roughly 7,000 to 10,000 years ago. So when your GPS can't find a signal, maybe you'll finally appreciate how handy it is to have a savvy epic about the sea's transformation passed down generation after generation. Of course, every old tale system has its oddities. One especially quirky nugget. There's a Western desert story where two ancestral beings, the Wanamintira, quarrel and throw hot embers at each other. The resulting sparks, it is said, become the first meteorites to fall on Earth. Imagine explaining to your science teacher that you flunked geology because the Outback sky's been raining leftovers from an argument between cosmic barbecue fanatics. While it's easy to laugh, the idea that stories can explain meteor showers with such poetic flourish sticks with you. Just like the time you learned the hard way not to eat fluorescent bugs, no matter how much they glow in the moonlight. Now, don't think these stories sit neatly filed away as simple bedtime distractions or idle entertainment. In Dreamtime tradition, they are as real and binding as the law, guiding everything from seasonal ceremonies to property boundaries. When a story says a certain hill was created by a dreaming ancestor, that assertion is more than metaphor. It grants the place an identity, a spiritual postcode. Through story, land is ultimately organized, each tale acting like the original urban planner, only with more imagination and, as a rule, fewer zoning permits. Enter the enduring scholarly puzzle. Historians still argue whether Dreamtime legends first arose as a method to survive, to explain, or to comfort. Was the intent more practical, helping people track food, find shelter, and escape flash floods? Or was it emotional, making sense out of chaos and giving humans a handy script for those existential dread at 3 a.m. moments? Or, and here's where the fridge light comes on late at night, maybe these stories did it all at once. Or maybe they do something else entirely that modern brains don't quite grasp, perhaps, like how Wi-Fi works, but more mysterious. To the indigenous custodians then, and to those drifting through their stories now, the Dreamtime is not some lost epic parked back in the distant past, like 1990s fashion that mercifully never returned. It's ongoing, simultaneous, always bubbling under the surface. The land isn't just the backdrop, the convenient set for the story's action. Instead, the land is the story unfolding. Tree roots curl through rock as a form of mythic handwriting. Rivers scribble out the punctuation, and mountains sit quietly holding up the chapters. And some of those chapters are still being written every season by the land's slow, patient movements. Now, your senses might pick up subtle details. The honey-thick scent of blooming wattles, a magpie's call echoing across a sunburnt plain, the crunch of ancient crystals under your heel. Each sensation connects to a different dreaming narrative, often with sly moral lessons. For example, a tale about the mischievous quoll, a carnivorous marsupial, teaches young listeners not to underestimate small things, whether that's actual animals or a suspiciously generous neighbor. If you listen quietly, almost meditatively, you can let these mythic threads thread their calming weight across your mind. The Dreamtime stories slow the rush of modern worry with images of creation that move on a geological clock. It's like Mindfulness, but with bigger lizards and probably more fun at parties. There's something deeply reassuring about feeling that your small, frazzled existence is woven into a tapestry older than time zones. Long before trains, planes, or bedtime podcasts, people sat beside glowing coals, hearing tales of how their world was sung, shaped, and argued into being. Even the constellations, scattered above, have their Dreamtime blueprints. An emu etched in stars striding invisibly across the southern night sky. Story and landscape repeat and mirror each other, forming layers of meaning as intricate as a eucalyptus root system beneath your feet. So when you next try to calm your mind, maybe after a frenzied day stuck in traffic or battling an especially stubborn spreadsheet, imagine returning to the heart of this Dreamtime origin. Picture yourself not alone in a random spattering of dust and shrubs, but as a living, breathing line in an ancient, unfolding story. The land, with all its oddities, is less a mystery and more an invitation to see the origins it keeps telling, over and over, as endlessly patient as it is weirdly reassuring. And let's be honest, who wouldn't want to share an origin story with a rainbow serpent, a meteorite-cooking ancestor, and an emu that left footprints across the Milky Way, while you scramble just to find matching socks in the morning? You settle your shoulders a little deeper and let the evening quiet hug you, as you find yourself sidling into the warmth of a campfire. You can smell the wood smoke, soft, earthy, and threaded with those crisp eucalyptus notes only the Outback seems to offer up. Your bare toes scrunch in the cool dust, and for a heartbeat, you share the hush falling over a group of listeners. Family, mob, travelers, perhaps a stray dog snuffling a lizard-shaped snack. In this gentle gloom, one voice rises, the storyteller. And as you lean in, you realize you're not just going to hear a tale. You're boarding a time machine without actual machinery, a spiritual bus driven by memory, connection, and a mighty impressive knowledge of animal trivia. Tonight, the story is a bridge. Storytelling, here and now, is a deft thread binding people not just to each other, but knitting you to every tree, river, star, and creature populating your clan's backyard. Imagine, for more than 60,000 years, Dreamtime stories have coursed through generations, distributing a cultural Wi-Fi signal that never drops a bar. Well, except perhaps during that one epic storm when the rainbow serpent got cranky. The stories, spoken aloud, aren't just entertainment or oral wallpaper. Oh no, they're meticulously crafted guidebooks for living in sync with the landscape. Reminders that you can't take all the river fish, that certain rocks are off limits, and frankly, that you should use your cleverness instead of poking sleeping snakes with sticks. Why complicate things? For the ancient communities of Australia, to tell a story was to connect people with the land. Because here, the land never lies flat. It undulates, breathes, and even grumbles if you miss the cues. You look up at the moonlit sky, and imagine hearing a tale about how the Milky Way was flecked onto the night by a clever emu, in a fit of cosmic creativity. Each story is a map, a warning, a celebration, and a poetic GPS reminding you to acknowledge the curve of each hill and the sacred hush of every billabong. But remember, the storyteller's job isn't all cozy campfire vibes and boosting bedtime serotonin. It's also about passing codes that everyone lives by. In some language groups, if you say the wrong word for a sacred animal or visit a forbidden cave, you're not just breaking the social contract. You're short-circuiting the universe according to Dreamtime law. You realize the teller's face changes with the tale. Reflective for the birth of mountains, sly for the theft of fire, solemn before sharing a cautionary yarn about why you don't annoy Willy Wagtails. As each word drops into the circle, it's not just the listeners who change. So does the land, which seems to sigh with recognition as stories paint invisible lines across it. And perhaps you suppress a gentle eye roll at the parental overload similarities. Listen, respect the elders, and for the 10,000th time, don't wander off where the bunyips live. Can you blame them? It worked for a few millennia at least. Yet there's a quirkiness too. There's that theory that in some groups, Dreamtime stories acted almost like biological field guides. According to one fringe tidbit that's just dying for a David Attenborough cameo, the stories about animals and plants often describe intricate details, like which tree bark is best for water, which grubs are tastiest, or when a certain bird cries, the wet season is coming. Mainstream history brims with admiration. In 1967, the Yolngu people shared detailed, 20,000-year-old stories of sea level rise that neatly matched modern geological evidence. Try remembering what you had for breakfast last Tuesday, let alone global flood events from 10 millennia ago. That's some serious mental Dropbox. There's even a campfire rumor that Dreamtime stories helped create one of Earth's oldest regulatory systems, teaching people to manage shared resources and resolve disputes. Move over, modern city councils. And as you listen under that big southern sky, you sense the land isn't just the setting, it's a living character. The living presence of ancestors, some shape-shifting into stones, trees, or clouds, means every element in the story has a role and a lesson. You try to imagine Western bedtime tales telling you, "Now, little Timmy, that hill is your great-great-granduncle. He made it by tripping over a kangaroo and transforming. So please don't build a skate park on his stomach." Historians still argue whether these stories existed solely to set a moral compass for young listeners, or if they also encoded practical survival tools so elegantly that you barely noticed you were being grilled, life coach style. In Dreamtime, the line between moral, myth, and manual blurs like a heat haze on the horizon. What really roots you down, though, is how each telling is tailored to the listeners. No one-size-fits-all bedtime stories here. You're invited to find your own meaning, explore your place in the world, and yes, occasionally zone out when the adults try and slip in the tax advice. The act of storytelling is a living performance, not a script. Language isn't static. Every telling can shift, incorporating a new twist if a big drought hits or a memorable hunt takes place. And so, the characters from the dreaming never feel remote. They pop up with uncanny relevance, offering a quiet nudge about empathy for the land, respect for elders, and the importance of not turning a basic cave painting into unhinged abstract expressionism. You remember as you sit that there's always a performer crouched at the center of it all, the storyteller. Sometimes that means a single soft-spoken elder. Sometimes it's a rolling chorus with dances, music, and mimicry, the way children's giggles ripple through the group as someone does a spot-on kangaroo impression. You notice that listeners don't just passively absorb. They ask questions, offer corrections, and debate details. The audience is co-author. Your participation matters. That same interconnectedness forms the core of why Dreamtime storytelling calms the mind. It reminds you you're not alone, not isolated, and not adrift in a world void of meaning. Instead, you're part of something rhythmic and circular, never linear. Time spirals, stories echo, and with each telling, you weave tighter into the web connecting person to person, heart to mountain, story to land. And anyway, who doesn't want to be part of the universe's original group chat, with updates dropping since the Paleolithic? Even now, sitting in the half-light, you recognize that the soothing cadence of the teller's voice is more powerful than you'd credited. Every new phrase settles you deeper into a sense of belonging and tranquility, the sort of peace a psychologist today would charge you good money for. But here, all it costs is your attention, your patience, and maybe your best listening face. So you savor it, the wobble in the voice when the story dives into danger. You sit quietly, letting your mind soften as the gentle hum of night drapes over you, and you begin to look closer at these Dreamtime stories, at the pieces that work together like beads strung on a necklace older than any library, fashioned not from pearls or plastic, but from symbols and creatures and spectral ancestors. Now you're not just nodding along, half listening to old legends. You're feeling your way through a living mosaic inside each tale, where every symbol crackles with meanings layered thicker than a lasagna. With each Dreamtime legend, it's not just the dramatic beginning or ending that matters. It's the tiny elements scattered throughout, the echo of an animal's call, a curve of a rainbow snake, a spirit ancestor's bold paint splashes on rock. You might laugh imagining a kangaroo rolling its eyes and thinking, "Really, you're talking about me again?" But that's the irony. Every creature, every swirl, and every spot of ochre isn't just artistic flair. It's a kind of cosmic password to a people's memory. Symbols first. Settle in and let your mind meander over ochre swirls and the iconic U-shape that means human being. This isn't your average emoji. In Indigenous Australian iconography, a semicircle with dots around it might mean meeting place or community, and straight lines could signal pathways, sometimes even real trails stretching crocodile-backed across the land. Imagine, you're using symbols not to jazz up a website, but to map memory, friendship, and real physical journeys. In certain Dreamtime stories, a simple dotting pattern holds mysteries, maybe the story of rain, or the way light and water play together during the sticky heat of an Australian dawn. The rhythm is hypnotic, soft repetition, geometric waves, even the gentle sarcasm of a lizard exaggerated, painted with just a few lines. You can almost smell the dry earth, hear the click of rocks beneath bare feet, each symbol bringing you closer to another layer of story. And lest you think this is all ancient paint and rigid rules, remember that some symbols are multi-purpose, a bit like how your phone charger fits 3 different gadgets. A spiral might uncoil as a water hole, but also echo the shape of an ancestor's journey across the land. Historians still argue whether some patterns were primarily art or code. Was it storytelling or navigation, or a bit of both, like a multi-tool before multi-tools were cool? Now let's pad quietly among the creatures, real and mythic, that stalk, crawl, and soar through Dreamtime tailies. Wedge-tailed eagles glide above, so majestic you can practically feel the wind cool against your cheek as you look up, following their looping shadow across the sunburnt ground. These aren't just background extras. They're teachers, comedians, and sometimes cautionary tailies. The rainbow serpent slithers past, an oversized, multicolored superstar, both beautiful and, frankly, a little intimidating. It's credited in many stories with shaping rivers and carving out creeks. And if you're picturing it high-fiving a platypus, you wouldn't be far off in capturing just how lively these tailies get. Some say the rainbow serpent's movement under the ground causes earthquakes, which is about as good a story as anything you'll find on late-night cable, and probably more soothing when the wind howls and your tent rattles at 3 a.m. The kangaroo, the emu, the cockatoo, each animal is a metaphor, mascot, and sometimes a prankster in residence. Maybe you remember hearing about magpies swooping cyclists. In Dreamtime, magpies can be the bringers of dawn or clever troublemakers. A mainstream historical fact, In scientific studies, the Australian magpie was declared one of the world's most intelligent birds, able to recognize themselves in mirrors. Wouldn't it be fun to ask a magpie for its thoughts on existentialism? Point is, these creatures in the Dreamtime are never just decoration. They encode survival lessons, where to find water, what to eat, how to stay alert, or represent moral codes or even the awkwardness of growing up, told through animal shenanigans that are somehow more relatable than your own middle school stories. There's always a bit of quirk tucked in, too. For instance, did you know there's a legendary bunyip, an elusive mythical water creature that's said to lurk in billabongs and snatch up those foolish enough to stray at night? To this day, some locals joke that the bunyip is the original "stay off my lawn" cryptid, and debate rages over what animal, if any, inspired it. Some say it's just an embellishment. Others swear it's based on sightings of long-extinct megafauna, or even a test of courage for children. Historians still argue whether the bunyip drew from travelers' tall tailies, fossil finds, or just the universal need for a bedtime boogeyman. Either way, you hear the word bunyip, and there's a chill, playful tickle down your spine. Suddenly, that quiet waterhole outside your tent feels a bit more alive. You slide deeper into these tailies, meeting the spirit ancestors, the creators and shapers, as vital to the stories as ink is to a letter. Sometimes, they're animals who walked upright in an age before separation, straddling the boundary between nature and magic. Other times, a spirit ancestor might be more amorphous, a rock formation that hums with meaning, or a tree that stretches further toward the sky because someone cared enough to ask it. You sense that these beings are not distant gods perched on clouds. They're relatives. The rainbow serpent slithers by again, and you realize it's not just inventing rivers, but weaving people together by shared story. Scholars debate, sometimes with that spirited enthusiasm only academic conferences can summon, whether the Dreamtime spirit beings represent archetypes of universal human experience or are uniquely Australian responses to a vast, unpredictable land. Maybe both. Regardless, these figures are not frozen in time. Every retelling reshapes them ever so slightly. One storyteller's clever ancestor becomes another's protector or mischief maker. It's almost like folklore runs on software updates. Sometimes, a Dreamtime tale throws in a fringe detail just to keep ears perked. There's a story about a giant frog who once drank all the world's water, growing to the size of a mountain, and releasing the rivers only after other animals made it laugh. Imagine that, a cosmic tickle party to save the world. It may sound outlandish, but look at it another way. These tailies are vitamin-rich myths, packed with empathy and humor, not just solemn lectures. The next time you're sipping tea, you might wonder, is this frog watching me? Better not spill. These symbols, creatures, and spirit ancestors are not just stories about the world. They turn the world itself into a story, where every rock, every ribbony water, you settle deeper into the hush of dusk. As the air cools and somewhere, the low hum of cicadas draws steady lines across your thoughts. You're not just watching, you're drifting right into the heart of a Dreamtime gathering, where ritual fires glow against the twilight and the very earth feels charged with possibility. As shadows flicker across ochre-painted faces, the boundaries between daily life and myth start to dissolve. This isn't an ordinary bedtime story. Tonight, you live inside it. Around you, the community forms a loose circle, children hovering close to elders, hands dusted with red clay and anticipation. You catch the scent of eucalyptus leaves smoldering in the fire, its blue smoke twirling upwards. This is no ordinary campfire entertainment. This is the ritual, the performance, the place where stories aren't just spoken. They pulse through the ground, the bodies, and the night air, like a living current. Here, each tale is performed rather than told. It's movement, dance, song, a kind of ancient open mic, but with no risk of someone doing an off-key karaoke version of Wonderwall. and you feel it. Your heart rate slows, your mind clears, and even your overactive inner critic is shushed by a hypnotic rhythm of clapsticks and deep, resonant didgeridoos that do more for you than any white noise app ever could. You're watching what is often called a corroboree, a term a lot of textbooks oversimplify as meeting or dance. Really, it's more like a shared dream that a whole community breathes into, each person feeding the story with energy and intention. There's no division between actor and audience. Everyone is necessary. Whether you're an elder keeping time with your feet or a kid, assigned to flap your arms about as an emu spirit. Nobody likes those school assembly performances where you sit as still as possible for an hour, right? Well, here, you're not allowed to sit out. Maybe your part is small, a flash of a dance step, the crackle of laughter after a clever mimicry of a kangaroo. But together, all these threads knot into something much bigger than any solo act could manage. These rituals aren't random either. They carve the calendar, marking times for hunting, gathering, healing, mourning, and celebration. The stories performed at each gathering echo the cycles of moon, rain, and animal migrations. Imagine if your Google Calendar suddenly included recurring notifications for Serpent Emerges ceremony or Whale Dreaming Dance, RSVP required. Every gathering is a living map of time and purpose. An undeniable historical fact is that some recorded performance traditions, like those of the Yolngu people from Arnhem Land, are at least 1,200 years old, proven by art, oral memory, and items passed from hand to hand. That's not a typo. We're talking about continuous living performance that predates a lot of the things you use daily. Looking at you, folks who can't imagine life without the smartphone, these people did community-building rituals before books, before Netflix, and certainly before TikTok dances became a thing. And as you sink into the rhythm, you realize that the performance is more than relaying a story. It's a healing act. Watch the way a sick child is invited to sit in the center, dusted with sacred ash as songs swirl around them. Songs and dances aren't just for fun, they're medicine. Movement and melody are believed to rebalance a person's being, to draw out what ails and fill up the emptiness with renewal. You might feel a skeptical twitch at the idea. No copay, no prescription bottle, just rhythm and communal presence. But there's modern research suggesting that group ritual and shared music can slow heart rates, encourage oxytocin release, and provide a level of psychological support that modern society is still trying to hack, with all those self-help apps and subscription sleep stories. And if you're waiting for the story's punchline or the secret cure for your insomnia, here's something that might amuse you. In some communities, the actual effectiveness of healing performances is believed to depend in part on whether the dances are performed precisely, down to timing, gesture accuracy, and even the mood of the participants. One missed beat and, well, hope your old warts weren't too attached. The flip side, people sometimes perform private, smaller-scale rituals, a kind of dreamtime takeout service, at home, humming story fragments to soothe an angry child or ease a restless spirit. This fringe tidbit gives new meaning to bedtime routine, doesn't it? Over time, scholars still argue whether the main function of these rituals is mainly psychological, providing a grounding sense of belonging and calm, or whether participants and witnesses truly expect the stories to interact with the world, shaping weather, healing wounds, guiding migrations. For the communities themselves, there's no need to choose. It's all part of the living system. Now, here's a detail to savor as the performance envelops you. The way voices harmonize, high and wavering in patterns that mimic birdsong, sometimes interrupted by sudden yips and claps that ripple through the audience like a gentle shockwave. You're aware, too, of the performer's body paint, chalky lines and handprints, patterns as much a language as the words themselves. These aren't random doodles, but visual spells to signal which ancestral beings are being invoked. To see it up close is to glimpse a language you can't speak, but that your body understands anyway. Maybe the person beside you nudges you, stifling a grin at the trickster spirit performer, his wobbling knees and goofy leaps lightening the mood. Yes, comic relief existed long before Netflix stand-up specials. Score one for the ancestors. The performance swells. A group of dancers rhythmically circle the fire, their feet thumping the dust, sending tiny shivers up your shins. The air begins to vibrate, not just with noise, but with purpose, energy, intent. Those stories about rainbow serpents or old man kangaroo aren't delivered as bedtime factoids. They are enacted, relived, drawn into the present so everyone feels the connection. You start to recognize the pattern. Each segment of the dance is a step in a longer, winding journey, and even your own heartbeat feels pulled along. If you listen closely, the way you lean into the quiet after a joke lands, you'll spot the little kids copying grown-ups, sometimes sneaking snacks during the slow dances. Nothing says tradition like a child attempting sacred Emus steps with sticky fingers. What really strikes you, lounging here in firelight, is the way these rituals can realign not only individuals, but the whole group. If you've ever tried to wrangle a family meeting or a group chat gone rogue, you'll appreciate how impressive it is that the entire community emerges from ritual feeling renewed, connected, a little less frayed at the edges. It's a kind of mass exhalation, a way to say, we remember, we belong, here you are, nestled into the imaginary red dust of the Outback, the stars drawing silent silver lines above your closed eyelids, letting those ancient Dreamtime stories begin to pool slowly across your thoughts. You relax your breathing, feeling the soft hush of the evening, and the world gets quieter with every word. Indigenous Australians have woven Dreamtime tales for tens of thousands of years, and somehow, these stories aren't just about explaining the world, but about soothing your mind, smoothing the rough patches of your day, encouraging you to lie back and let your thoughts swirl in their own gentle constellation. This is not some modern mindfulness app whispering buzzwords over whale sounds. No, here, you're stepping into something much richer, older, something that has comforted generation after generation. Any stress you carry has to pass through the filter of a million firelight retellings. Your cheeks start to relax, your forehead loses its day's wrinkles, and your mind leans into a kind of ancient, attentive calm. You notice the slow cadence of phrases, as though each is measured to match your breathing. In Dreamtime stories, the patterns of speech matter, a little like meditation mantras, but infinitely more colorful. Think less and more when the rainbow serpent slithered, a river formed behind her shimmering body. You realize each tale was traditionally spoken aloud around a campfire, or drawn out in sand or on rock walls with ochre. The very act of storytelling a ritual for quieting rowdy minds. The kids, maybe the odd rogue dingo, even the old-timers. Imagine an ancient audience, fidgeting like you with digital fatigue. But instead of doom-scrolling, they wait for the storyteller to conjure up a rock formation, morphing into a lizard or a star that learned to dance. It's not quite bedtime ASMR, but it's close. You already see how stories stretch beyond passive entertainment. They structure your awareness. With each detail, the magpie calling out the sun, the bustling goanna carving the land, you're urged to pay attention, to notice the pulse of things. Picture it, you listen closely, and in that concentration, anxieties blur and recede. According to modern historians, this atmosphere of mindful storytelling may have functioned as a kind of early group therapy. A fun fact: some communities used mulberry bark as a musical accompaniment, rhythmically whacking the ground to help guide listeners' breathing. It's like the original white noise machine, but with more dust and slightly less Bluetooth connectivity. According to the mainstream record, Dreamtime stories reach back at least 65,000 years, stretching further into the past than any known written mythology. In a way, you're practicing one of humanity's most ancient stress relief routines, one that predates the invention of the coin toss, pet rocks, or even the wheel. Sleeping under the southern sky, your only obligation is to absorb and let go. Oddly, some anthropologists still debate whether indigenous storytelling was truly meant as mindfulness practice, or if that's just a neat modern projection. Whatever side you're on, you can't deny the effect. Your shoulders seem to let go of a tightness even you didn't know you were carrying. A quirky tidbit floats into your mind. Once, in a remote Australian desert, a group of elder women timed their Dreamtime songs with the pace of a slow kangaroo hop, believing the rhythm lulled even restless spirits to calm. So if you ever try kangaroo hopping around your living room as a method of relaxation, just say you're pioneering ancient stress management techniques. Historians will back you up, or at least nod politely and scribble notes. The Dreamtime, you see, isn't a neatly contained event. It's everywhere. When you listen or visualize, you enter that landscape, one that's neither strictly past, present, nor future, but a long, undulating story. As you focus on the undulations, you feel your muscles think about melting. And yes, that sore spot in your lower back quiets for a moment. Each tail, bent around the fire, encourages you to slow your pulse, to be present, to imagine the land not as dead rocks and trees, but as ongoing, awake, and breathing. You are not separate from your environment. Each thing you see or hear, the wind, the ant trails, the fading echo of a didgeridoo, is part of the ongoing narrative. You're a guest and a participant both. This is mindfulness before mindfulness hashtags. Call it mindful vibing, maybe. Joking aside, you get the hint of humor embedded in the stories. Cunning animals outsmarting the obvious, or hopelessly confused emus that accidentally invent a new river. No wonder some folklorists compare Dreamtime to a kind of nighttime yoga for the brain. Instead of downward dog, you're deep in thoughtful echidna. Sure, it's no surprise that just about every culture has its own version of bedtime stories. But here, each retelling is a soft meditation. The repetition, the rhythm, the resolve. You allow yourself to tune out unhelpful distractions. Some modern researchers claim that regular exposure to these narrative routines can measurably lower blood pressure and heart rates, a point some still argue furiously over at academic conferences, likely louder than is strictly necessary for maximum zen. If you think about it, this is less a history lesson and more a gentle immersion. Close your eyes, well, not too tight, and imagine the bushland soundscape. You don't have to have met a rainbow serpent in real life to appreciate her impact. It's enough just to walk the winding songlines inside your head, each one a crumb trail to a quieter state of being. There's a deliberate slowness at work, a dreamy wait that makes 15 minutes feel like all the time in the world. It's worth noticing how even the act of retelling, a brother elbowing a sister, a father correcting the arc of an emu's track, draws your focus from yourself to the greater world around you. This isn't personal meditation, but communal grounding. The group's calmness becomes your calmness, collective and multiplying. Just beware. Occasionally, someone nods off mid-sermon, but that's a mark of success, not boredom. And now, those quirky details still stick with you. The scent of eucalyptus smoke, the flick of yellow ochre in the firelight, the periodic assertion that cockatoos genuinely invented practical jokes. You appreciate that even now there's no rush, no need to come to some tidy conclusion, just a progression. The Dreamtime story heads wherever it pleases, like a creek running between unexpected stones. This process is the point. You feel that gentle sarcasm sneaking in. Maybe the Dreamtime is the original Calm app, for those who prefer their reassurance unplugged and kangaroo adjacent. You realize there's joy in the ritual. It isn't just about calming down. It's about anchoring yourself to all the rhythm and color of your ancestors, of the broad, living land under your imaginary feet. You hear the debates in academic ivory towers about interpretation, intent, historical layering. Historians circling back time and again to argue whether Dreamtime was always meant to be soothing, or if this is simply how it works on modern, overstretched psyches. Scholars wag fingers, but beneath the scholarly bickering, you notice what matters. These stories work. They slow things down, detangle snarled nerves, and connect you, breath by breath, to something more permanent and vast. Somewhere you wonder, could you, in your apartment or room, actually slide into this ancient awareness? Try it. Next time you need to reset, close your eyes and replay a Dreamtime tale. Give yourself over to the watery sibilance of a serpent or the slow beat of an ancestor's footsteps. Maybe hum a kangaroo hop rhythm just for fun. Whatever works. There's no need to strive for perfect clarity or enlightenment, just a gentler perspective. The world will survive if your to-do list doesn't. As you get more comfortable, you realize you're inside something profound. A legacy of slowing down, of letting your mind tread the sandy, story-filled landscapes of the world's oldest continuous culture. The Dreamtime isn't about escape. It's about returning again and again to the place inside you where everything is connected, where each story's soft breath echoes in your own ribcage. And the world, for a moment, is quieter, slower, and easier to bear. The gentle hush of the Australian night settles around you, as if inviting you to look up. Imagine the sky stretched above, deeper than midnight and scattered with stars that seem to hum with stories. In this hush, you hear the quiet voice of creation, the slow exhale of Dreamtime, those deep, ancient tales of beginnings that cradle the world and your own wandering mind. Here, you're not just a listener. You become part of that earth-shaping and sky-unfolding, feeling each story root you to the ground and feather you among the stars. You start to sense how, for tens of thousands of years, Indigenous Australians told of a world born not with a bang but with a slow waking, like the drowsy stretch of a child before dawn. All around you, every rock, tree, and gust of warm bush air, even that persistent mosquito, whispers its connection to these Dreamtime stories. It begins with the nothingness, pure potential. You might picture endless, formless darkness, quiet but alive beneath the surface. Out of this silence, the ancestral beings stir. They're not your standard fairy tale folk. These ancestors are shapeshifters, spirits pulsing with possibility, sometimes half man, half animal, or a little bit of both with an extra dash of cosmic mystery. They travel through the dream, not in a hurry, no traffic jams in the initial cosmos. And everywhere they wander, land and life unfurl behind them. With each footstep, they press the world into being, raising mountains, opening rivers, and coaxing gum trees to unfurl their leaves. Mainstream historians have traced the presence of these stories back more than 60,000 years, placing Indigenous Australians as some of the world's oldest continuous storytellers. Seriously, when you compare that to the age of the pyramids or Stonehenge, you're basically time traveling every time you dip into a Dreamtime creation story. The legends might tell of Tiddalik the frog, who drank all the water on Earth, leaving everyone thirsty until the other animals coaxed him into releasing it. Q lakes, rivers, and, presumably, the invention of the first group therapy session for a dehydrated continent. Of course, the plot gets stranger at times. In some regions, you've got ancestral beings like the rainbow serpent. The rainbow serpent slithers through the landscape, shaping mountain ranges and riverbeds, its scales reflecting every color of the sky after rain. One moment the land is curled tight in sleep. The next, the serpent is wriggling through, leaving behind winding waterways, and if you listen hard enough, a low, sibilant hum in the earth. Picture it. The original landscaping crew, no overalls necessary, just cosmic serpentine style. Some clans tell stories where gigantic emus stride out, scraping the dirt, pushing up red earth into the first ridges and hills. Birds, mammals, and marsupials all become unlikely interior designers, crafting not just geography, but the very identities of those who walk on it. From the ocean, you might spot tales of the creation of coral reefs by spirit ancestors, their laughter bubbling up as the waves meet the land. A reminder that sometimes the cosmos has a sense of humor, even if you missed the punchline. Or maybe you didn't, and that's why clownfish exist. The beauty of these Dreamtime creation stories is that they're not just about things, rivers, hills, trees, they're about connections. You don't merely hear how the world was formed, you feel your own breath sync with the ones who shaped the rivers. Every landmark, a boulder, a grove of ancient eucalyptus, even the pattern of stars that glimmers in the southern sky, becomes a story still alive, not just a leftover from long ago. It's a bit like looking at the world and finding subtitles running beneath everything, a quiet script of origin in sand and leaf. But don't get the idea that all these stories are standardized, mass-produced mythology, neatly filed like superhero comic books. No, each clan, each region, needs the plot lines into their own taste. In one region, the rainbow serpent brings the rain. In another, it might swallow up spirits as a warning. Respect the water holes or suffer the consequences. Sort of the first environmental regulation program, one could say. There's a quirky tidbit you might enjoy. In Arnhem Land, there's a version where the serpent's burrowing actually creates thunder and lightning. So if the next storm spooks you, you can blame ancient reptilian mischief and not just your dodgy weather app. You'll find Dreamtime stories everywhere, etched into rock faces and caves, painted onto bodies and bark, always evolving. Some scholars argue, and honestly, historians seem to love a good argument about which stories are oldest or most original. But the truth is, these tales dance between time and place, thriving on change instead of fossilizing into one version. This fluid storytelling links communities and generations, letting each retelling break the earth open anew, as if the universe is a little bit like a loaf of bread, best enjoyed fresh, sliced, and shared with others. Creation, in the Dreamtime sense, is cosmic but also deeply local. You join a long line of listeners tracing the journey of the Seven Sisters across the Milky Way, watching the stars shuffle their ancient choreography above desert ovals. These seven sisters, followed by mischievous pursuers, become both celestial and earthly, teaching vigilance, safety, and the benefits of a well-timed escape. When you stretch out beneath the night sky, you might almost sense their laughter, echoing in the cool air, as if inviting you into their cosmic game of hide-and-seek. Scholars still debate whether the Aboriginal interpretation of the Pleiades predates similar stories in other cultures, which leads to a larger, sleep-worthy musing. How did so many early societies gaze up and craft similar yarns from the same smattering of starlight? Sometimes you get the sense that the line between history and myth is beautifully blurry here. Was that boulder always a boulder? Or could it be the slumbering body of a dreaming giant who once tried and failed to catch the sun? In some creation stories, sun and moon themselves are not distant, indifferent orbs, but brave adventurers or tricksters with braces of lore for every waxing and waning. The Dreamtime treats reality as a story constantly being told, which, if you think about it while dozing off, might be the ultimate stress buster. Even your worst day can become part of an epic, universe-shaping narrative. And who doesn't want to imagine themselves as the main character from time to time? Strange turns abound, the creation of fire, for instance, sometimes credited to birds stealing embers from a celestial bonfire, or ancestral women, singing up new plant life as they travel along mythic songlines. In fact, if you ever needed an excuse for spontaneous singing in the shower, you're just tapping into an ancient creative tradition. And there's that delightful fringe tidbit. Some believe that the sound of the didgeridoo was gifted by Dreamtime spirits as a way for humans to echo the calls and songs that once birthed the land. Next time you hear its earthy drone, you might just be catching the original theme tune of creation's first act. All along, these tales hold you in gentle suspense, like the world itself could open into a new story at any moment. The creation is ongoing. The dream times, you gaze up into the cloud-draped dusk and spy a slow glide of wings above you. Maybe it's a wedge-tailed eagle, scanning the land just as it did in the Dreamtime legends you heard whispered by firelight. In Australia's Dreamtime stories, animals never just wander through as background extras. They're fully realized, mysterious main characters, shaping the world and your sense of it. Every paw print, call, and streak of fur or feather is packed with layers of meaning, like finding the decoder ring in a box of cereal. Some symbols are heavy with sacred significance, while others carry a sly wink or two. Tonight, let's drift deeper into this animal-dotted landscape of the mind, where kangaroos, emus, and rainbow serpents don't just anchor Australian identity. They dance in the twilight between myth and memory, putting you deliciously at ease. As you settle in, you find yourself sensing all those creatures moving through their dreaming, sowing meaning into soil and sky. You might recall how, in mainstream history, the kangaroo stands as such a powerful national symbol that it hop-skips straight onto coins and flags. Though perhaps if a kangaroo really did appear on your coin, you'd be more tempted to collect the whole set than pay for parking. But in the Dreamtime's gentle space, kangaroos aren't just mascots or menu items. They are shape-shifting ancestors. Their long, careful bounds defining the rise and fall of red rock hills and the winding path of dry creek beds. To this day, storytellers might remind you that the kangaroo's great leap is a lesson. Move forward, carry what matters, but never backpedal into the past's traps. Not a bad motto for getting through traffic or through life's more complicated days. Laughter drifts quietly through your thoughts as you picture the mighty emu, another Dreamtime heavy hitter. Imagine a bird so large it can outrun a horse and so stubborn. Rumor says it'll keep walking if you plant a fence post in its way. Dreaming tailies cast the emu as moral guide, builder of rivers, even accidental shaper of the stars. Its feathers ripple in the storytelling night like rivers of charcoal. Some say the dark bands across the Milky Way aren't clouds at all, but the celestial emu stretching from horizon to horizon, her unfinished eggs gleaming faintly among the stars. Historians still argue whether this connection between star patterns and emu tracking is intentional wisdom passed down from ancient astronomers, or just one of those happy accidents you spot while lying flat on your back, letting the world slow down. Either way, when you see the southern stars, you might spot an emu running across them, a memory of times when cliffs and sky sang with the same voice. As you drift further into these animal stories, you catch the glimmer of the rainbow serpent, Dreamtime's ultra-mysterious mega-icon. This vast, coiling being is said to have slithered through primordial mud, its sinuous body carving rivers, raising mountains, and watering every living thing that followed. In the stillness, you sense the rainbow serpent's scales flickering, casting shimmering colors over dust and water holes. Aboriginal groups from Arnhem Land to the Kimberley each have their own tales about the rainbow serpent, sometimes gentle, sometimes fearsome, always infinite. This great snake is more than a world builder. It's a cosmic judge, defending some places and testing the courage or greed of those who come too close. There's a whisper that the rainbow never fully vanishes. It just ducks behind the next hill, waiting for you to notice where spirit still hides. Now, here's a quirky tidbit. Some Dreamtime stories feature creatures that today are lost to us, like the Geniornes, a giant flightless bird everyone calls the thunder chicken of the Outback. Fossils and ochre markings alike hint that elders wove legends around meeting these huge, now extinct animals, proving that Dreamtime tailies are sometimes the last refuge of vanished beasts. That's your cue to imagine the awkward family barbecue where someone's talking about emus and another pipes up. Back in my day, the birds were taller than a house and squawked like thunder. You grin, mind drifting toward gentler Dreamtime creatures, like possums, sometimes seen as tricksters with furry pajamas, sometimes givers of fire or clever planners in the animal pantheon. How about the platypus, quietly side-eyeing conventions, both in biology textbooks and in stories? This oddball with its duck bill and beaver tail is said by some to be the reminder not to take yourself, or anyone for that matter, too seriously. Your own worries shrink down to size, while thinking about a mythic duck-beaver critter teaching the world that being different is more fun than blending in. Each animal shapes the dreaming in ways you can almost feel beneath your skin. For many Aboriginal groups, totemic connections mean certain lineages are bound to specific animals, so deeply that every success or crisis in the clan echoes the health or laughter of the animal itself. You imagine growing up feeling that kinship, so much so that spotting a kangaroo or hearing an emu's thumping stomp means more than just wildlife watching. It's a reassuring old friend, keeping you stitched into the fabric of the world. A reminder that your story counts even if you stand quietly at the edge. You feel the comfort in that, like softly worn flannel, seamless and gentle. Sacred places, too, are peopled with these creatures' spirits, merging stone and song. Ask an elder why a creek bends or a mountain looks like a lizard asleep in the sun, and you'll get not just an answer but a whole saga, the dreaming made material. Some cave paintings show animals in luminous ochre, their outlines flickering as if poised for just one more leap into your dreams. There's even an ongoing scholarly debate about whether some rock art is evidence of gatherings for teaching, or if they're cosmic warning signs. Beware, here be ancient crocodiles. Bring your best sunscreen. Call back to that legendary sunscreen, because nothing says timeless wisdom like a smear of mud and a squint into the midday glare. Even today, Aboriginal rangers and storytellers consult Dreamtime animal knowledge for practical guidance. If frogs start croaking before the wet, it's time to prepare for storms. If the magpie calls at dawn, maybe you'd best pay attention. Trying to outsmart a Dreamtime magpie is a losing proposition. Just ask any cyclist in spring who's been initiated by one. Animal lore, quirky warnings and all, survives because it moves with the generations, across stories, songs, and the quiet hushes of dusk. These Dreamtime animals don't just liven up bedtime stories. They shape the day-to-day relationships with the land, regulating when and where to harvest, telling you when to sit still and watch for spirit nudges. The animals become timekeepers, judges, even comedians, all wrapped up in feathers, fur, and sly animal grins. As you lie there, you let these animal stories fill the landscape of your mind's eye. The emu, fierce and determined. The kangaroo, leaping with steady purpose. The sly possum and ever-adaptable platypus. The rainbow serpent, shimmering behind every rain puddle. It's the gentle web of meaning they bring that soothes you, the old rhythms and friendly relationships persisting through centuries. Take one last sleepy moment to imagine the red-dusted earth, the ancient starry sky. You close your eyes and picture the Australian outback, vast, sunlit, stretching to the horizon with its stubble of pale grasses and hunched ghost gum trees. But you don't just see the landscape, because in this moment, you are tuning your mind to feel something deeper, the low, steady hum of a place thick with stories. For Indigenous Australians, this isn't just dirt and rocks. Every outcrop, riverbend, or errant boulder is buzzing with memory. You get the sense a place is not just a stage for stories, but the story itself, still being told. This is the magic of sacred sites and storytelling spaces, where land acts as a living archive, and you walk through it barely realizing you've entered the world's largest open-air library. So next time someone brags about their multimedia hard drive, you might kindly remind them, that's cute, but the Yarra River's been backing up ancestral dreaming for 60,000 years. Here, every kangaroo track and sand dune is loaded with legend, serving up both knowledge and a gentle, cosmic shush. Like being in the quietest, most respectful museum, only with way better lighting and the occasional lizard sprinting by as you drift further into this dream walk. You start to sense that sacred site isn't just a fancier word for old place. Instead, it's an active relationship, land and story locking eyes for eternity. For example, you might come across Uluru, the massive ochre heart of Australia erupting from the desert, and realize it's legendary not simply for being, well, boulder-sized, but because every fold and fissure is mapped to a creation story told through countless generations. You imagine a group of elders centuries ago softly tracing a line along the rock with their fingers, whispering, "Here's where the Mala people first danced, here the water snake carved tunnels." Modern science agrees. Archaeological evidence dates human activity in the Uluru region back tens of thousands of years, making it one of the oldest continuously sacred places on Earth. But listen closely. Scholars still argue whether every feature of the rock was shaped directly by ritual, or if some stories adapted to match already peculiar geology. Either way, you get to be part of the story just by standing in the shadow of the stone. If you're expecting stony silence at these sites, think again. Sacred places in Indigenous Australia aren't hidden away or roped off with neon, do not touch tape. They're living, breathing, full of song and ceremony. Some are towering monoliths recognizable from plain windows. Others are humble, maybe a particular bend in a creek where water runs sweet in drought, or a patch of ochre-rich earth, bright enough for ceremonial paint. Each is stitched into a story map known as a songline. Imagine you need directions, but instead of a GPS, you use a melody or chant, winding your way from site to site, discovering bits of your tribe's identity scored across the earth like the world's slowest, coolest board game. It's kind of cheating to call it oral tradition. It's an interactive, multi-sensory Google Maps, complete with its version of "You missed your turn." Only the notification sounds are didgeridoos. This navigation by song is so effective that some songlines stretch up to hundreds, even thousands of kilometers, connecting tribes, languages, and mythologies across the Red Continent. The land gives the stories, and the stories preserve the land. You hear boisterous tales of the rainbow serpents snaking through rivers to create water holes, or you feel the whispered caution at a fire-blackened spot, marking an ancient catastrophe. Every tree, ridge, and cave can be encoded with knowledge. Where to find water after a hard season, which plants are good for hunger or healing, which rocks you absolutely do not disturb unless you want serious spiritual repercussions. Or, a nasty rash, because some things are both mystical and practical. There's a sweetly mundane rhythm to these storied spaces. You may find the world's most dangerous animal lurking behind a legendary tale. The bunyip, for instance, an aquatic beast feared to haunt billabongs, was probably also a warning to keep children from swimming at night. It's not just a bedtime monster. It's public safety dressed up as folklore. Scholars still can't agree whether the bunyip is entirely imagined or partially inspired by real-life sightings of now-extinct megafauna. Even today, you might hear a local shrug and say, "Well, you never know, it gets weird out there after dark." You nod wisely. It pays, after all, to respect the archives. But what exactly makes these spaces sacred, and how do they teach calm? It all circles back to a looping, comforting idea. The land is alive, aware, and rich with meaning. You imagine sitting cross-legged in soft red sand, letting the heat seep through your bones. An elder begins a story, his finger sketching shapes in the dust as the light fades. You don't just listen. You inhale the history, tasting the dust, feeling the breeze on your skin. This multisensory immersion isn't accidental, it's intentional. The performances that echo through these sacred sites work double duty. They're both lessons in survival. Don't eat those berries. Avoid the crock-filled pool and soft, repetitive reassurance that you have a place in the world. You belong because the land remembers you. Then comes a quirky detail to file away for your mental trivia night. Not all sacred sites are easy to spot. Some, like the so-called dreaming rocks, odd-looking stones found half buried in the earth, are believed to be the physical remains of spirit ancestors. You picture a young hunter, thousands of years ago, tripping over such a rock and realizing with awe that he's literally stepped on history. Or maybe history has tripped him as a gentle nudge. Today, local guides occasionally refer to sleeping ancestors beneath the ground, a delightful way of reminding everyone not to get too cocky with a shovel. The debate goes on. Did the stories invent the sites, or did the landscape inspire the talees? No one's entirely sure, and that, honestly, is part of the fun. When you move through a storytelling space, there's another subtle magic at play. The atmosphere is oddly calming. Perhaps it's the tangible sense of continuity. Elders have stood here, whispering these same words for unbroken millennia. If you listen closely, you may even catch the echo of an ancient laugh trailing through the eucalyptus. The stories told here aren't just about epic battles or magical beasts. Many are meditative catalogs of animals, plants, seasons, and celestial cycles. By reciting a tale at a sacred site, you reinforce a mindful awareness of what's around you, a grounded presence that, ironically, makes you feel light years away from the stress of modern life. After all, it's hard to worry about your inbox when you're learning how the Milky Way was woven across the night sky by emus, or when you're fretting over whether that odd burrowing mammal is actually a marsupial, or just a very ambitious hedgehog. Answer: in Australia, it's almost always a marsupial. Sorry, hedgehog fans. You may also notice that memory here is communal. Storytelling often happens around the campfire, beneath a blanket of stars untouched by city haze. No phones, no Netflix recap. Instead, group murmurs rise and fall, reinforcing the tale and the calm. These rituals offer the way you settle in after dusk, eyes heavy and ears open, is not so different from the time-worn rhythm of listening to stories mapped out by songlines. You sense the subtle vibration under your feet, the quiet, invisible traces left behind by generations of storytellers, their voices humming with meaning, their languages so rich and textured that they seem to sculpt the very air. You're not just learning a language, you're navigating a living archive, a secret map tucked into the syllables and sounds of Dreamtime talees. You realize now the words are far more than placeholders for meaning. They're mile markers for spirit and memory. Take a single word from an Aboriginal language, Makapmer, the Yolngu word for belonging. When you repeat it, it doesn't feel clunky or forced. It feels like a slow exhale after a long day, a soft landing. Language in Dreamtime storytelling is built for belonging, to each other, to country, to the hallowed lines that thread across the land. As you drift deeper into this world, you start to notice how the rhythm of each phrase keeps a gentle watch over you, coaxing you into a rhythm that is both ancient and as steady as your own heartbeat. Now think about songlines. You walk under a painted sky, the horizon melting beneath your feet, and every step echoes in the words and songs that came before you. Songlines, sometimes called dreaming tracks, are like GPS, but not the kind that tells you where the nearest coffee shop is. Instead, they're poetic sung maps, musical trails stretching across the Australian continent, connecting waterholes, mountains, and sacred sites. Skilled storytellers sing the same verses for hundreds, even thousands of kilometers, mapping out the terrain with sound and story. If you squint a little, it's a bit like downloading the directions to your favorite meme. But the meme is 10,000 years old and written onto the earth in verses no one's ever forgotten. Every note in a songline corresponds to a landmark, a tree, a bend in the river, a cluster of rocks. You'd never need to check your phone for directions. Instead, you'd practice remembering a pattern, a series of phrases, each imitating a part of the landscape. Imagine singing your way to the supermarket, the melody shifting as you pass by the bakery or the frozen foods aisle. In Dreamtime storytelling, this isn't just a party trick. It's a crucial way to navigate both the physical world and the world inside your head. Mainstream historians agree. Some Aboriginal songlines stretch for hundreds of miles and have been carefully maintained for thousands of years, predating written maps by generations upon generations. But language is more than survival, it's comfort too. There's a sleepiness that comes from repeating a soothing refrain, the kind of lullaby passed down from clan to clan. You press your palm flat against the red earth and can nearly hear the murmur of old lyrics, sung under the stars in a language you can almost taste, something earthy, slightly peppery, like the smell of rain hitting hot dirt. Speaking or singing these words is a ritual that grounds you, especially when the world feels like a washing machine set on spin cycle. You might be thinking, why bother memorizing all these songs when Google Maps exists? But in these stories, memorization is connection. It's an anchor in a world always threatening to drift off course, your very own ancient playlist for navigating uncertainty. You hear about songmen and songwomen, custodians of these oral maps. Their job is basically to drop sick beats laced with centuries of geographical and spiritual data. Only instead of lighting up a dance floor, they light up the landscape, ensuring the knowledge is danced, spoken, and sung along every important trail. Interestingly, some songlines even cross language borders. When two groups meet at the edge of their territories, the stories and songs sometimes merge, kind of like a musical crossover episode, with each side recognizing parts of the map in their own way. There are stories of travelers learning enough lyrics in another tongue to survive an epic trek, all by hitting the high notes at just the right time. This brings you to a quirky tidbit. Historians still argue whether some songlines were also encoded with secret social messages, like old-school gossip or cryptic warnings, only decipherable if you knew exactly which verse to dwell on. There's speculation, too, about so-called bad tracks, lines you'd never want to hum in the wrong place, lest you attract the wrong sort of spiritual attention. Imagine accidentally singing the Forbidden Bridge at a karaoke bar, and suddenly everyone freezes. In Dreamtime practices, this might be more than embarrassing. It could be spiritually dangerous. And yet, the beauty of these ancient languages is that they carry layers. Roots, rules, histories, and jokes, all bundled into a single melodic thread. Scholars puzzle over the sheer sophistication. Some debate whether a songline should be called a song, a map, a memory system, or all three at once. The line between language as expression and language as navigation blurs in Dreamtime storytelling. One mainstream fact that tends to blow people's minds. Some of the landforms and waterholes marked by these verses are still traceable today, scientifically verified to be pretty much where the lyrics say they are. Not bad for a system that's never needed Wi-Fi. You pause to imagine how the first sunrise over the land might have sounded when sung into being. In some traditions, the very act of naming places during a song is believed to reawaken the spirit of the land, a way of keeping it alive. So each time you listen to a Dreamtime story in its original language, you're not just a passive audience. You're an apprentice in a long-running ritual of renewal. The act of speaking or singing blurs the past and the present, the ancient footstep and your own. The power of these oral traditions also lies in their communal aspect. These aren't bedtime stories you keep to yourself. No, you gather with others around the fire, under those uncannily bright southern stars, and the lyrical words carry you through the chill night air. Someone's voice rises in the darkness, and suddenly you're all travelers, striding out together along invisible highways mapped long before asphalt existed. The resonance of language shared aloud soothes not just the mind, but the group. You bond, if only for a moment, over the strange but comforting notion that all roads, at least the important ones, are remembered in song. It's humbling, too, knowing that the longest continuous human languages in the world are still very much alive in these communities. These aren't just relics, dusted off for special occasions. People joke in them, scold in them, tease their grandkids in them, and tell off kangaroos who have gotten too close to the garden. Linguists today scramble to document the hundreds of distinct languages and dialects, each with their own flavor, synonyms for eagle, and words for places you'd never think needed naming, like the perfect rock for napping. Your brain starts to itch, wondering if there's a word for the feeling of cozying up with a Dreamtime story. Maybe there is, tucked away in some tongue that's been protecting it for millennia. And yet, many of these languages teeter on the edge of being lost. Urbanization, modern pressures, and the swamping effect of English have chipped away at the tradition of singing up the country by heart. Revitalization efforts have never been more necessary. A reminder that wellness isn't only about bubble baths and chamomile tea, but sometimes about learning to whistle the way your ancestors did. If you think of it, songlines are like the world's original mindfulness practice. With every repetition, every chant, attention is channeled into the present. There's no room for worrying over tomorrow's bills or that text you shouldn't have sent. The mind is tied, gently and insistently, to the rhythm and meaning of the story. You can almost laugh thinking, who needs an app for tranquility when you have 40,000 years of field-tested songs? You find yourself meandering across the boundless Australian outback under a swirl of indigo sky, starlight dusting every rock and grass blade around you. The cicadas have clocked out for the night shift. The only company you keep is the distant memory of Dreamtime stories echoing softly, swirling in your mind like the gentle haze above a summer campfire. Somewhere between your bare feet and the ancient red earth, the roots of resilience quietly wind through time, twining your own story with those of countless ancestors. There's a hush of ancient wisdom here, as if the world is gently nudging you to slow down, settle in, and listen. Not just to your racing thoughts, but to something deeper still, nestled right where modern stress and ancient calm collide. As you ease into the dusk, you remember the elders' voices, each syllable drawing you into a world layered with myth and meaning. You realize Dreamtime tales weren't just for those long winter nights around the fire. They were, and still are, the original mental health toolkit designed to anchor your spirit in the wild whirl of life. It's remarkable, isn't it, that these stories have survived for over 60,000 years. That's almost as old as the socks you accidentally left at the bottom of your gym bag. Don't worry, nobody's judging. A little ancient stink never hurt anyone. Mainstream historians agree this is the world's longest continuous cultural tradition. Yet the ways Dreamtime stories fortify the mind are often left out of dusty textbooks. So how does this work? Picture yourself as a young child, nervous and shivering beside the fire. An uncle or grandmother leans close, their words shaping the air. Once, before people or kangaroos or climate change documentaries, the ancestors wandered in the Dreamtime. Waterholes sprung from their footsteps, mountains rose from their snoring, and rivers traced lazy arcs where their fingers dragged. With every tale, you learn that the world isn't a random mess. It's a tangled but purposeful web, filled with spirits, creatures, and landmarks that all mean something. And here comes a quirky tidbit. Sometimes the lesson is literally written in the stars, like the infamous Emu in the Sky constellation, which, unlike your failed attempt at assembling IKEA furniture, actually holds together. Try explaining that to the frustrated Allen wrench in your hand. You notice something subtle that works on your nerves and heart. Dreamtime stories don't resolve with neat, Hollywood endings. There's grit and struggle woven into each myth, as well as acceptance and peace. Maybe the rainbow serpent slithers away, leaving you pondering why life isn't always predictable. Maybe the songlines wind on, their melodies echoing unanswered questions. The scholars occasionally squabble. Was Dreamtime always meant to soothe? Or were stories first about survival tactics, with calmness as a happy side effect? Some propose the very act of listening, breathing, and letting your mind wander in concert with ancient words creates a subtle psychological resilience, a soft armor that shields your nervous system from panic and dread. Imagine as you curl up that anxiety hits you. All sharp elbows and nervous twitches sound familiar. Instead of reaching for your phone to Google how to stop spiraling at 3 a.m., you tune into the story, recalling how the cleverman, brimming with the wisdom of a dozen lifetimes, faced his trials. These tales offer a slow and steady blueprint for crisis management. Here's the cool part. According to oral tradition, just hearing the details of a hero's struggle, whether it's outsmarting a trickster dingo or negotiating with a sassy magpie, invites you to breathe deeper, knowing that hardship is woven into the pattern of life. Everyone gets a wily dingo or two. Now you might wonder, what about modern science? Surely, these ancients didn't read clinical psychology journals. What they had, though, was a form of exposure therapy. Feel your fear. Confront echoes of it in the story. Then watch the tale resolve, sometimes with triumph, sometimes with heartbreak, always with a sense that endurance is, in itself, sacred. It's like the world's original group therapy session, with slightly less bad Zoom audio. Elders wrap you in a cocoon of belonging, memory, and identity, celebrating your victories and setbacks alike. Still, the debate rages at the edges of academic circles. Did the tale's calming power come from their reassuring rhythms, the soothing geometry of their patterns, or just the collective act of gathering in community, elbows pressed together, faces dappled by dancing firelight? Maybe it's all three, or perhaps it's something deeper, lost to colonial misunderstanding and the passage of centuries. You pause, listening to the blood hum of your own body, noticing a slow shift inside. Maybe you're not just learning to survive the rattles of anxiety. You're inhabiting a mental space that generations upon generations have tested and refined. A space where the world makes sense because it's already mapped, storied, and sung. You see your worries scatter across the sand like seeds, ready to be gathered, stored, and sometimes, yes, transformed. Still, it's comforting to imagine the Dreamtime as psychologist and shaman rolled into one, long before the self-help aisle was a thing. There's another creak of calm running under these tales, the reassurance that when you falter, the ancestors already have. They've stumbled, argued, even gotten embroiled in cosmic pickles that make your Monday morning Zoom call seem tame by comparison. You grow up learning that mistakes are baked right into the cake of existence. You're not required to be flawless, just to keep walking, keep listening, keep telling the stories. Maybe you've noticed yourself repeating the same plot point a few too many times. The "this year I'm definitely going to the gym" epic, for example. But even that's expected. A little gentle mockery, a lesson in humility, a reminder that nobody, kangaroo, human, nor crocodile, is immune to a good old-fashioned life stumble. Remember those community gatherings, so integral to the dreaming. They're not just for show. Scholars say that the shared experience of hearing these stories creates a social safety net so dense, even the most persistent bad mood would get tangled up and forgotten. When you listen and share, you're not just pressing play on Netflix for the 1000th time. You belong to something ancient, a lineage of listeners and storytellers who survived droughts, wars, and awkward family reunions. Historians still argue whether the awkwardness was more potent during Dreamtime or modern holidays, but we may never know. Community rituals, dancing, painting, singing, and laughing, deepen the sense that pain and hope are communal property. Your sorrow is held, repaired, and reimagined. Even minor grievances, a lost hunting spear or someone eating the last piece of bush bread, can be solved by a good yarn and a little ribbing. You learn to mock misfortune with warmth, which modern research shows makes stress easier to manage. The danger loses its bite when you wrap it in a punchline or see it turned into legend. In fact, the sacred clown figure pops up in some Dreamtime tailies, dancing the wrong way, telling backward stories, always reminding listeners that laughter belongs beside solemnity. And isn't that the strength you seek? Knowing that adversity is both ancient and survivable. That even the hardest night can be soothed by a whisper of ancestral wisdom or a chuckle under the stars. As fatigue settles in, you come to believe that Dreamtime stories weren't just entertainment. They were remedies, blueprints for carrying your burdens along the songline, no matter how heavy. When you hear the Dreamtime echoing through time, resting in your ear, you're reminded that panic and shame are fleeting visitors, never permanent house guests. So next time your mind wriggles like a startled goanna, racked by worries over deadlines or disappointments, remember the resilience baked into every Dreamtime tale. The earth thrums beneath you, reminding you that you stand on a foundation shaped by story, song, and 1,000 tiny acts of endurance. Keep listening, so now you pause amid the thrumming blur of daily life, scrolling, typing, unlocking endless notifications. There's this deep sigh somewhere inside you, a little human yawn for meaning and ease. Somehow, as you imagine those Dreamtime tailies crackling through the evening light beneath an ancient gum tree, your mind begins to loosen its white-knuckled grip. You might think stories traced out under the Southern Cross would fade away with stone tools or ochre paint. But Dreamtime stories, in their layered textures, have found a kind of stubborn, soothing relevance in today's anxious world. Even now, their echo is everywhere. In art galleries, in gentle children's books, even in guided meditations tucked into wellness apps. Yes, really, there are Dreamtime audio journeys for your phone. It's almost funny, isn't it? At some point, people went from invoking rainbow serpents to asking their smartwatch for a mindfulness tip. Progress, in its odd, roundabout way. You settle back, letting the edges of these ancient stories soften into the present. Today's world, with its laser focus on productivity, efficiency, all those baked-in metrics, can make your mind feel like a computer with 50 open tabs and a scrolling wheel that just won't quit. Yet people are reaching for Dreamtime stories as a hack, though a much older one than spreadsheets. Instead of swiping up for breaking news, you can lean into a whispered narrative about a wise emu or a mischievous quail who outsmarts the heat. There's reassurance in knowing that your troubles, however modern their costume, echo the age-old worries about survival, connection, and peace. Dingoes swap for deadlines. Mainstream psychologists have noticed the power here, too. Around the world, mental health experts weave cultural storytelling, like Dreamtime tailies, into their therapeutic toolboxes. It's called narrative therapy, and it's less about recounting every embarrassing childhood mishap, more about the power of collective myth to melt away shame, fear, and self-judgment. Suddenly, you're not just anxious, isolated on your bed, but a participant in an ancient drama. You're an echo, weaving your own frayed strand into a much vaster tapestry. Oh, and if you think that sounds cheesy, try remembering what the mindless doom scroll did for your cortisol lately. The healing charm of Dreamtime stories isn't just in the plot twist of the clever platypus or the patience of the witchetty grub. It's lodged in the very formula of the telling. When an Aboriginal elder shares a dreaming narrative, alive with rhythm, repetition, warmth, and just the dash of mysterious vagueness to leave you curious, it pulls you out of shaking future thoughts into the steady, humming present. There's no flashy confrontation or cliffhanger demanding to be resolved before bed. Instead, you trudge gently through an otherworld steeped in images and meanings that don't need to be solved, just absorbed, like a good soaking rain. Let's be honest, the nightly news is rarely prescription-strength calming. Dreamtime performances, with their gentle builds and evocative, sensory ritual, are closer to a nature documentary and guided breathwork session fused with story. Still, some historians argue whether those story circles, with their palm-to-dirt earthiness, were intended primarily as stress relief or as community regulation. The truth is probably both, a bit like how teenagers say they're just doing homework, while really watching videos of dogs in hats. Take one mainstream fact. The Australian Psychological Society has actually recommended Aboriginal cultural knowledge, including storytelling, as a key resource for emotional resilience, especially among young people caught in the crosswinds of colonial and modern pressures. The tailies, with their cycle of threat and harmony, explain that dark moments are woven through life, but so is renewal. Yes, your inbox will always refill. So do the billabongs, season after season. You might hear of quirky approaches, too. Some primary schools in Australia hold Dreamtime storytelling days, where kids wear kangaroo ear hats and sit in a circle listening to Uncle Bernie recount how the sun learned to share the sky. And did you know there's a movement to design urban parks and playgrounds, even VR games, using Dreamtime mythic maps? You can hunt for the Tiddalik, the frog mural, while waiting for your latte. He's big, green, and very thirsty. It's a subtle turning of hard concrete back towards soft myth, hoping, perhaps, that just a little ancient calm will sink in through the soles of your sneakers. Modern wellness movements have tried to bottle the magic. Mindfulness teachers encourage slowing down to the rhythm of the spoken word, echoing the Dreamtime way. You close your eyes and try to imagine the rustle of eucalyptus leaves, the sharp scent of campfire smoke, the unhurried voice spinning a tale about jagged stones and dreaming stars. Sure, the therapist's office might have a lava lamp instead of glowing embers, but the function is similar. Ease the body, still the mind, dissolve isolation through communal meaning. There's a good one for the innovativeness of modernity, returning to oral tradition with a Bluetooth speaker. Scholars still argue whether modern storytelling really captures the medicine of the original Dreamtime circles. The sacred smoke, the bundled blankets, the kinship lines carefully woven through every pause under the Milky Way. Is a bedtime podcast, layered with soothing didgeridoo samples and softly spun tailies of the rainbow serpent, enough to match the sheer presence of a flame-lit story, live, with breath fogging against the night? Or is something essential lost in translation, an intangible weaving together of community and identity that no screen can replace? You might say it's like comparing a VR rainforest to walking barefoot through dew-heavy grass. Similar, but oh, that smell of wild mint. Still, you find comfort in the adaptability. These Dreamtime legends refuse to be pinned down or pickled. Instead, they ripple outward like soft water in a billabong, cupping up anyone, stressed office workers, lonely students, wheezy retirees, who would step gently into their flow. The stories are a kind of psychic sunscreen, no crocodile dung required, shielding modern minds from the low burn of constant alertness, teaching the rhythm of patience, and offering a language for timeless struggle. No wonder mindfulness guides everywhere have caught on. If slow living gets another rebrand, it might as well come with a painted boomerang. Let the Dreamtime stories remind you that your mind, whatever its hyperconnected state, can be soothed by gentle, layered myth. With each retelling, you touch the past, sometimes awkwardly, sometimes in awe, and realize your stresses, while real, fit inside something bigger. No one expects you to build an entire sand drawing by moonlight or recite clan genealogy from memory. But as you listen, maybe you'll cradle a little of that Dreamtime quiet for yourself, just enough to breathe easier through the swirl of calendar alerts and headlines. Even in our technological present, the slow wisdom of the Dreamtime spins out subtle lifelines of peace. The gentle cadence of ancient stories, whether told on a desert plain or streamed in a city, teaches that emotional rest isn't a luxury, but, like water or laughter or clever platypuses, a necessity that roots you to the land beneath your feet and the quiet inside your mind. So lean into, as you listen, Picture yourself beneath a starlit southern sky where an elder's voice flows steady and soft, thread by thread weaving dreamtime stories into the night. The flicker of a fire gently lights faces, grandparents, parents, children, all caught in that delicious drift between attention and dreaming. The stories you hear tonight aren't simply for entertainment or education. They are meant to do more than pass the time. They are the very veins of memory that keep a culture's heart beating across centuries. And that's the surprising magic of transmission, the old-school art of retelling, replaying, and reliving these stories, still alive and surprisingly resilient, much like the goanna waiting out the heat beneath a gum tree. You might think, in our streaming-obsessed world, that stories would need some high-tech boost to travel through generations. Instead, for the custodians of Dreamtime, oral storytelling has always been high definition, surround sound, fully interactive, and, if you count the odd, mischievous trickster tale, occasionally ad-supported by grandma's sudden laughter and a knowing wink. If you've ever had a relative threaten to eat your leftover dessert in the night, you've glimpsed the transmission process in miniature, passing down habits and warnings, sometimes by sparking a shiver, and sometimes by prompting a family giggle. Now, within Dreamtime traditions, the flow of stories works much the same way, except insert cosmic emus and shape-shifting lizards for the angry dessert thief. Elders gather children not just to share old tales, but to wrap crucial survival knowledge within story layers, where the water holes can be found after drought, why that patch of berries is best left alone, or how an eclipse might signal a time for caution. If you've ever spiced up a bedtime story with, and then a meteor hit, congratulations, you've entered the vast league of oral improvisation favored by Dreamtime narrators. Here's where the technique shines. Unlike dusty tomes sitting lifeless on shelves, Dreamtime stories shift, stretch, and adapt. Their custodians will sometimes emphasize weather warnings during stormy years, or focus a little more on animal respect during a drought. It's storytelling with a functional wardrobe, always fitting the times and the weather forecast. Historians note that long ago, transmission relied on expert memory palaces, think mental Google Maps, embedded into songlines, stretches of melody and narrative that stitch landscapes together. One mainstream historical fact is that these songlines acted as oral maps, guiding travelers across vast and daunting terrain, encoded with landmarks, clan boundaries, and incidentally, the location of the region's tastiest witchetty grubs. The quirk gets better. Whispers persist that certain sacred story objects, like a well-worn digging stick or a decorated stone, have become so attached to their stories that touching them in silence is said to recall the narrative straight into the mind. There's even a lively scholarly debate about whether such artifacts merely prompt memory, or if the act of tactile storytelling actually summons something of the story's power for both teller and listener. Imagine a bedtime tale so vivid you could hug it. Eat your heart out, ebooks. At the center of this story sharing sits an essential truth. The tales are only alive if passed on. A Dreamtime story untold is like a possum without a tree to nap in. Cute, yes, but feeling a bit lost. In some traditions, the very act of narrating the story is believed to keep the land's spirit healthy, meaning that every bedtime retelling is a little act of ecological repair. Not to stress you out before sleep with environmental responsibility, but just think. Every time you recount your peculiar uncle's misadventures, you're not only keeping family lore alive, you might just be saving an ancient riverbank in Dreamtime metaphysics. A delightful side effect. The transmission process creates more than memory. It builds a web of relationships, stretching from elders to the youngest child with sticky fingers and 1,000 questions. By answering those why and how come queries, storytellers gently reinforce a shared vision of the world, a fabric of meaning threaded with care, patience, and let's face it, a little showmanship. Repetition is not dull in this world, but a sacred practice. Each retelling sands the story smooth, so it fits perfectly into the listener's heart. Elders add or subtract a detail here, modify a voice there, updating the story the way you might hit refresh on a weather app to see if the sun will shine for your picnic. Sometimes, when a story is particularly precious or sacred, rules and rituals regulate who may hear it, or even which language is used. Secrets, warnings, and initiations all echo through these layers. Some knowledge only for those who have shown respect or reached a certain age. As you imagine this, you might laugh thinking of teens today trying to sneak exclusive Dreamtime DLC before leveling up. Yet in this careful gatekeeping, the stories don't just survive, they retain their power, keeping anxiety at bay and fostering that unique shade of self-esteem sprouted by feeling included in something much older than oneself. And yes, modernity sparkles its way in. These days, you might find Dreamtime stories retold through children's books, radio shows, art murals sprayed lovingly on city walls, or even TikTok dances. Just imagine an emu moonwalk and you're there. But the bones of the transmission process don't change. Seeing children lean in, eyes wide in the firelight, or under the blue light of a smartphone if it's a Friday night at home, you realize the nervous system loves ritual repetition. Each time a child or a visitor soaks up a Dreamtime myth, their minds find shelter. The words become lanterns for the dark, dispelling loneliness and grounding bodies in the land beneath their feet. There's something gentle in this repetition, ancient, reliable, and stitched with laughter. Even if the world outside flashes with noise, the inner world, shaped by stories, grows calm and sturdy. Mental well-being hooked to tradition, it's almost like brain yoga, letting imagination stretch, touching toes to distant ancestors. Quite the mind fitness routine, minus the leggings. If you let yourself, you start to feel how transmission is deliciously physical. Stories are taste, sound, touch, smoke from a campfire, the thwip of a boomerang, the scratchy tickle of ochre dust. You can't help but grin at the thought. In Dreamtime lands, mental health first aid looks like sitting down, closing your eyes, and letting the past talk you through the present. If only every wellness app came with a kangaroo-shaped cloud floating overhead. Scientific studies, yes, the kind with white coats and clipboards, increasingly nod in agreement. People who feel rooted through oral traditions show resilience in the face of stress, anxiety, and the quantum puzzle of modern life. The act of sitting, listening, and wondering, especially when stories are shared by those you trust, fires up neural pathways for hope, security, and even just the lull that lets you fall asleep without counting existential anxieties. The funny thing is that transmission is never perfect. Stories aren't like backup files zapped to the cloud. They are more like grandpa's secret cookie recipe, always a little different each time, evoking laughter when one cousin claims there was never any cinnamon, only to be contradicted by an aunt insisting cinnamon was the very soul of the tale. It's in these wobbles, these cheerful arguments, that traditions stay supple and alive. Children become keepers long before they realize, retelling fragments in backyard play, or humming a snatch of story song to their little siblings, or, occasionally, to the family dog, who always listens politely if not attentively. And yes, there are scandals, occasional tailies of a story carrying an accidental hiccup, with a detail forgotten or a twist invented anew. Historians still argue whether this is tradition's greatest threat or greatest asset. Does improvisation dilute meaning or keep it vibrant? For now, it seems stories survive because perfection isn't required. What matters is the ritual itself, the gathering, the steady handoff of meaning. You, listening now, become part of that river of transmission. Like a Dreamtime ancestor tracing a songline, your mind maps the echoes of an ancient world. Calm, picture yourself under a deep velvet sky, where the stars scatter in ancient clusters above you. the heartbeat of the earth humming beneath your back. Maybe your phone is somewhere far enough away to be safe from impulse checks. Maybe your shoes have finally lost their city dust. This is your chance to borrow, not steal, just gently borrow, some simple dreamtime wisdom and cradle your mind in a softness older than sleep itself. Begin as you might if you were quietly sitting with an elder beside a glowing campfire. You listen not to chase information, but as if the words and silences both could soak into you and untie a few knots you hardly knew you'd lugged around. Dreamtime stories, remember, aren't just stories. They're living maps of the spirit, and as you settle, you start to realize they offer actual, practical steps to calm even the most tangled modern mind. First, try tuning in to the rhythm of nature, the kind that Dreamtime stories breathe through every being and stone. Instead of chasing after a mindfulness app, that, let's be honest, you'll mute 5 minutes in, you feel the breeze nudge your cheek. Hear the way distant frogs croak and overlap in round, liquid pulses. Aboriginal wisdom teaches that noticing is a way of belonging. You don't need an expensive retreat. You sit and you truly notice. The way a leaf's shadow flickers, the sand under your fingernails, maybe even the stubborn mosquito who's made you its life's quest. Here's a mainstream historical gem. Researchers know that Aboriginal Australians are possibly the oldest continuous culture on Earth, tracing unbroken lines back at least 60,000 years, which is considerably longer than your streaming video queue. There's comfort in that longevity, a peace that comes from feeling you're part of a story much vaster than to-do lists and sticky notes. Alongside the mainstream lies the fringe. Some have whispered that kangaroo tracks themselves once served as Dreamtime-inspired meditation labyrinths, if you can picture hopping contemplatively. A few scholars snort at this, and the debate over how Dreamtime symbols translate into daily practice is still a candlelit one. Historians still argue whether these symbols were literal spiritual guides or more like epic bedtime stories for community bonding. Let's float back to you, carrying a piece of Dreamtime calm into your real, humming world. Try this. Whenever your mind fidgets, call up an image from a Dreamtime tale. A wise serpent, perhaps, weaving rivers with its body. Inhale deeply, as if gathering the river's cool water inside your chest. Exhale slowly, letting your worries trickle downstream, watched by the quiet, ancient eyes of spirit ancestors. You're practicing visualization, Dreamtime style, using rich story images as your own personal, brain-calming TV channel, minus the monthly bill. Give yourself time to remember that everything in Dreamtime is connected. If you're anxious about tomorrow's meeting or that cryptic emoji from your boss, imagine your fretfulness as a little quivering creature. In Dreamtime wisdom, animals aren't just symbols, they're friends and potential guides. You might imagine passing those anxious feelings along to a clever lizard or a deeply nonchalant emu, trusting the land to share your burden. Tiny acts of sharing, yes, even with imaginary ancient animals, have grounding power. One more gentle technique, the art of walking as storytelling, echoing the famous Aboriginal practice of songlines. Next time you step out, preferably somewhere not lined with billboards for off-brand energy drinks, try tracing a mental path through your surroundings. Link each landmark you pass. A mottled lamppost, the sound of distant laughter, the oddity of a shoe abandoned in a hedge, with a snatch of melody in your mind. The song needn't make sense to anyone else. This is your own navigation system, a soft Dreamtime pilgrimage. Mainstream historians have recognized songlines as both literal routes across Australia and intricate memory aids, like Google Maps if Google quit and decided to become a poet. Fringe theorists, meanwhile, enjoy debating whether old songlines can actually bend time, letting a walker tap into some deep time presence. The debates ramble on, of course, with academics squinting at ancient footprints and trading theories over instant coffee. Even if you're walking in a city scrubland rather than the Outback, Your brain can ride these memory trails, stringing together moments in a calm, purposeful journey. Here's a sly, sleep-adjacent joke for your trouble. If you ever get lost following an imaginary Dreamtime animal on a walk, just remember, neither Google nor a serpent ancestor is likely to answer emergency calls. But at least you'll have an excellent story for your group chat. Another practical Dreamtime tip: lean into repetitive motions that connect you to the earth. Clapping your hands, tapping your foot, or even drawing lazy spirals in your bedsheet. These simple, rhythmic gestures reflect the ritual moves of Dreamtime ceremonies. They're not about performance or getting steps in on your smart watch. They're grounding rituals for settling both body and mind. You might not have ochre paint and didgeridoos handy, or maybe you do. No judgment if your online shopping took a turn. So borrow quietly from the intent behind these traditions. Use pattern, repetition, and awareness to remind yourself you're safe in your space, however humble or messy. When ancient Dreamtime performers swayed and sand-painted danced, the rhythm itself shaped community healing. They knew that soothing body and mind was a communal, not solitary, act. If you're doing this ritual brushing your teeth, hey, that counts too. Let your mind wander a little, gently. There's a Dreamtime practice of letting thoughts float like leaves on a stream. Watch them drift by instead of chasing after them with a metaphorical butterfly net. If a stubborn thought keeps circling back, usually about laundry or that embarrassing email you sent 5 years ago, send it downriver, watched over by a grumpy but wise platypus. Yes, a platypus can be a spiritual guide. Historians argue about a lot, but no one has resolved whether the platypus is really a powerful Dreamtime being, or just the universe's idea of a practical joke. To weave Dreamtime wisdom deeper, try learning and quietly repeating a simple word or phrase in an Aboriginal language. Feel the shape of unfamiliar sounds, letting syllables lull you in the dark. Language was, and is, a Dreamtime tool for weaving people, land, and story into a kind of mental wool blanket. Even whispering a greeting to the land or to your own heart can stir a sense of belonging older than anxiety itself. Modern research tells us that speaking a new word can spark parts of your brain needed for calm and memory, the ancient equivalent of a neural lullaby. And as you practice, blend in a little humor, as elders sometimes did. If things get too solemn, imagine a Dreamtime ancestor tripping on a tree root, grumbling about modern shoes. Calm, after all, rarely takes itself too seriously. Before sleep claims you, soft and persistent as a Dreamtime rain, recall that these simple wisdoms don't require you to completely overhaul your life, sell your furniture, or move to the Outback. Although if you do, please send photos. All they ask is presence. A willingness to let the old stories nestle beside your modern worries, nudging them into something softer. Historians will doubtless keep debating what Dreamtime wisdom really means, whether it's a set of techniques, a mythology, or a way of reshaping perception itself. But as you finally let the evening's hush descend, you notice how stories linger like fireflies in the folds of your mind. And tonight, it's the dream-heavy drift of the Dreamtime that soothes you most. You're cozy on your pillow, eyes tracing dim shapes on the ceiling as you recall the gentle way every Dreamtime story wound around more than the simple act of telling. It became a rhythm of connecting, a slow breath across centuries, a bridge between pounding heartbeats and the ancient calm of the world itself. You sense this now, your pulse slowing, your breathing deepening, as if you two are tethered by invisible songlines, each one humming with restfulness. The Dreamtime, those endless spirals of creation and care, play out not just as stories told to children, but as lifelines. Ropes braided from wisdom, humor, wild animals, and landscapes so memorable they nestle in your thoughts even as you shut your eyes. To connect with Dreamtime is not to imagine some dusty shelf of legends waiting to be dusted off. Instead, you step, barefoot of course, into a stream of remembering. You notice your own small worries shrinking as you drift, the mind wrapping itself around images of rainbow serpents swirling through red deserts, or wise old ancestors sitting cross-legged beneath ancient gums, gesturing at stars that are persistent, stubbornly unmodernized, and completely reassuring. There's a deep comfort in this, like wearing socks straight from the dryer on a cold night, which is honestly something the ancient storytellers would probably appreciate, because they knew the importance of finding soft places to rest. Historians still debate whether Dreamtime stories emerged all at once like a cosmic pop, or whether they grew over thousands of years, shaped by each generation, each voice adding a tiny twist or flourish, like how recipes slowly become spicier over time when your uncle's involved. One mainstream fact that amuses you as you settle into oblivion: Dreamtime lore is widely considered one of the world's oldest unbroken cultural traditions. For over 60,000 years, Aboriginal communities have walked these mental songlines, passing guidance along with yams and laughter. Picture that, over 1,000 times longer than the entire lifespan of a smartphone battery. The story you imagine yourself floating in doesn't ask for you to understand every symbol. It just asks you to slow down, to let the edges of anxiety soften, and to trust that peace was made for borrowing, not hoarding. You picture the sacred sites that animate these tales, not so much landmarks as living, breathing archives. Every stone and creek a library with a memory and a light chuckle. Not unlike that time you tried to be a serious adult and ate kale for a whole week. In Dreamtime, everything is part of the story. The wind brushing your cheek, the odd little frog you saw hopping down the sidewalk last Tuesday. They're all connections. Even modern scholars, as composed as they look in documentaries, sometimes can't agree on how much Dreamtime is about strict spiritual order versus a joyful, playful acceptance of the world's oddness. They argue late into the night, but you, fortunately, just get to close your eyes and smile at the possibilities. For example, did you know early explorers once tried mapping indigenous songlines as if they were railway tracks? Straight, logical, aimed at destinations rather than experience. That's like reading a bedtime story only for the ending, instead of relaxing in the lull of every word. The best part, Dreamtime lets you off the hook from hyperproductivity or understanding every detail. You can just lie here, absorbing the slow knowing that maybe life is bigger, funnier, and more mysterious than it pretends during the work week. That kangaroo hopping through the story, he's not here to guilt you into jogging at sunrise. He's an emblem of resilience, but his presence is also a reminder of how patience and soft-footed movement through the world can be its own form of wisdom. And as you listen for those echoes of song, language woven with air, sometimes sung, sometimes just thought, you find yourself joining an invisible chorus. The old aunties reciting lessons by firelight would say, if you listen close, anything can tell you a story. Even your left sock, especially if it's gone missing for the 100th time. The Dreamtime sense of circular time, where endings are simply new beginnings, begins to wrap itself around your fatigue, coaxing it gently down. The debate among anthropologists about whether Dreamtime is history, allegory, religious code, or all three is still ongoing. But lying here, you're in the rare position of not having to choose. The lines blur. The figures in those tales are both ancestors and animals and perhaps, after all, ways of making you feel less alone on Earth. Quiet now, you realize this isn't just storytelling, it's invitation. A kind of permission slip to be just as you are, tucked up and slightly imperfect, human and worthy. You remember a quirky tidbit. Some Aboriginal groups viewed snoring as a sign of deep spiritual connection during Dreamtime rituals, not as a cause for embarrassment or a reason for that nudge in the ribs. So tonight, as your own snores threaten the local wildlife, don't worry, city pigeons are notoriously forgiving. You know you're actually participating in tradition, one gentle rumble at a time. The value in Dreamtime stories isn't just their age, but in their daily invitation to step away from screens, to let your brain drift over ancient rivers, to discover that calm doesn't require shutting out the world or pretending you're floating in a Himalayan spa. It's about letting the world in, story by story, image by image, letting each river and animal and wise old turtle chip away at panic until what's left is something close to contentment. You sense the difference as your breathing slows. This isn't about forgetting your troubles, but about tucking them into the pocket of an old wisdom, letting tomorrow's responsibilities wait their turn. Just like the cautious goanna in that story who learned to pause before each step. Those same goannas, by the way, are still the subject of wild debates. Are they totems, ancestors, in-jokes, or all three? You don't need to decide. You can just enjoy, like letting the last bite of good dessert melt as slow as possible. Now in this half-dream, half-awake haze, you reconnect, not just to ancient stories, but to the rhythm they accidentally gift you, slower heartbeats, breath deepening, smiles lingering for no particular reason. You see that the mind finds peace not by demanding it, but by surrendering to a broader story, by realizing that you belong in a lineage of listeners who have always needed comfort. Dreamtime isn't a relic under glass. It's an unending lullaby, and whenever you need it, rainy Tuesday or stressful Thursday morning, it's already humming faintly at the back of your mind, ready to usher you to a softer place. Before you let yourself tip fully into sleep, you might, just for fun, try inventing your own Dreamtime story. Maybe it stars the world's sleepiest echidna who finds a hidden spring at the end of a long and twisty journey, or a magpie who prides herself on rearranging your shoe collection at dawn. In Dreamtime, humor is reverence, and calm is not the absence of trouble but the companionship of stories old enough to have seen all storms